We in our company just believe in the philosophy of if you're going to say something, otherwise don't. And so that's the approach to politics. And I love it. I find it's very refreshing.
Welcome to The Lift, the show about leadership, growth, and getting what we want. I'm your host, Ben Brooks. For over a decade, I've worked with CEOs, their executive teams, HR departments, and entrepreneurs to identify what drives their success and what holds them back. And now I'm excited to share those insights with you. On The Lift, we pull up to see the bigger picture from accomplished leaders who know how to get things done in a rapidly changing world. We've got all of that and a lot more coming up next on The Lift. Hey everyone, today we're joined by Sachin Shivaram, the CEO of Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry. Truth be told, I was a little nervous about this conversation. Sachin is not only a CEO, but he's on more boards than I can count on one hand, including the Green Bay Packers. He's also a dedicated community member, family man, and he advocates for better childcare for his employees. Talk about goals. In our conversation, Sachin shares insights that I think a lot of leaders could benefit from. He shows us how CEOs and executives can commit to the greater good of not just their company, but of their communities more broadly. And paradoxically, he shows how spending time outside of his company sometimes has the biggest impact to his company. I'm so excited to introduce you to Sachin. Let's get into it. Well, Sachin, welcome to The Lift.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be here.
So, Sachin, we're going to start with a few rapid-fire questions to lift up our energy, have people get a better sense of you, and get us started. What's a hobby or pastime that you enjoy?
Running. I have been a runner for 30 years. Actually, it started out when I was a kid. I was actually quite obese, and my brother was a runner, and one day he said, you should try running. And I ran around the park across our street one day, and since then it's been just a fundamental part of my life and something I can take everywhere I go.
And what's one of your favorite places on this earth?
As a kid, I spent a lot of time in India. My parents are from India, and my mother would take my brother, sister, and I to India for the entire summer, sometimes even before the school year ended, all the way until the day it started. And really, we never had a summer in Wisconsin. And our home in India, where my grandparents lived in a city called Mysore, which is in the southern part of India in the state of Karnataka, is a place I think about a lot.
Southern India in the summer as well, probably. You're prepared for hotter summers now.
Yeah.
What was your first job ever where you got paid for time or effort?
I was a legal secretary at a local law firm called Quarles and Brady in Milwaukee, where I grew up, definitely because of this job that I had. They are our legal counsel right now.
Amazing.
But yeah, I was paid $7 an hour. I was a summer legal secretary, and mostly I would transcribe conversations. But yeah, that was certainly something that helped put me on the path to going to law school. It was intense.
And you're in Wisconsin, in the heartland of the United States. What's a best kept secret or a surprise that people that haven't been to or are not from Wisconsin should hear?
There is a strong culture of community. I don't think this might not be a shocking revelation to anybody, but there's so many people that we live with and work with who have moved out of the state and come back. They come back because of, this is where I feel like I'm part of something. And I think it has a lot to do with the geography, but Wisconsin has, kind of an abundance of these small 10,000 person, 5,000 person towns that really are good grounds for building community. And this is the feature of the state that in our home that really brought us back.
And one of the features that I think a lot of people know about is cheese. Do you have a favorite cheese?
Cheddar, is the go-to here, but actually there are varieties of kind of mozzarella type cheeses that are coming out now, made by a company called Belgiosio that people might think is based in Italy, but actually it's in Denmark, Wisconsin, and I drive by their factory every day.
And, if we were to have one of your best friends describe you in a few words, how would they say, Sachin is ...
Curious. This conversation is very much unlike the normal conversation I have, which is generally it's one directional or I'm asking all the questions, and I just really enjoy peppering people with questions. Yesterday I had lunch with another local CEO, and we were there for an hour, and I really enjoy that. So I think curious and probably intense. I think that's probably another word they might use to describe me.
Those might be actually in mine as well. Someone once asked me, what do you love about yourself? And I said, my intensity. And what do you hate about yourself? And I said, my intensity.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, Sachin, as I was preparing for this episode, I thought to ground us, you are the CEO of an aluminum foundry. How should people understand or visualize what an aluminum foundry does or what yours does specifically?
Our main activity is we pour aluminum into molds to make custom shapes for our customers. So our customers can be any type of manufacturing company, whether you're making medical equipment or truck parts or cookware. And so we make the molds out of many different elements, but primarily sand, which is actually a millennia-old process. Thousands of years, people have been making castings in the very same way. It's we make a mold out of sand, and then we pour molten aluminum into it, and then we destroy the mold to harvest the part.
And given your industry is part of manufacturing, in recent times, there's been a lot of changes and disruption in the external context. Externally, tariffs have massively changed your context, changes to government funding that supports programs for economic development for small and mid-sized businesses that help you become more competitive or advance your engineering practices. What has it been like for you as a leader and a CEO dealing with such rough waters?
In our corner of manufacturing, not only are the waters rough, but they're flowing against us. The natural flow of our economy is we allocate, our precious resources, capital and human, to the best uses of that. And actually, aluminum castings is kind of a low value add. Well, it's high value add in the manufacturing sense in that we're not just putting something together, we're transforming a product, but it is low value add in the broad economic sense. And so we're constantly swimming against this trend of there are better uses for capital. Other companies can pay people more and get more value out of that. So this has been the current for the past, forever, but really it's been intense for the past 30 years, where as the American economy has evolved into a more service economy, there are higher paying jobs out there and there are better uses of capital. And so we've been swimming against that, holding our own by adding more value to what we do. We make better, higher quality parts, we do more services on them, and we try to add on other services to kind of at least tread water. Now, more recently, there has been kind of a national consensus around, hey, these are jobs that actually we need, we want to preserve for national security, but also because they're fun jobs, you get to touch what you make. And so the turbulence today is actually more generated by probably the government trying to figure out how do we help people like Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry. And there's not one way, and something that might help us hurt someone else, and so that's where we see the tariffs, for instance. Some of the tariffs might be beneficial for us, but they make our customers less competitive because it raises their costs. And then maybe their demand goes down. So this swirl of hard to control consequences is what's creating this turbulence right now. So how is it, running a company? We just have to focus on our North Star, which is how are we continuing to be distinctive in our market? And as long as we're special and as long as we're doing high quality things, there's going to be a place for us in the world. But certainly, in these turbulent times, you're spinning all which way and you don't know if you're actually headed in the right direction and you can feel unmoored.
And if I was at the dinner table with maybe your wife, who's a professional at McKinsey, and your boys, what's different? Are you more stressed? Are you more tired? Are you working more? Are you running more? Are you running less? I'm curious about this sort of very personal impact on you.
Yeah, this year has been, very stressful, driven in large part by challenges at our respective companies. McKinsey has been in the news, and certainly people can read about the challenges that they have had. She's been there 15 years and loves the company and believes passionately in their work, but that has been stressful for her. Actually, this week she's traveling to Prague and, I'm with our boys on our own. And then for me too, demand has been down. We've had gut-wrenching challenges. We've had some layoffs. We've made investments that aren't paying off right now. So yeah, it has been stressful. And then I'm involved in other companies, at a board level, and challenges are the same. I've had some running injuries, and I think there's something with, physical pain in your body that connects to your mind and it amps up the level of stress. And then there's also, just getting older. I'm 44, my wife is 45, where, it's, everything everyone says about growing older and how your body takes longer to recover, how you probably need more sleep sometimes, all of that. And then our boys, they are 8 and 13, and they are very active, and we have a lot of help to help us get through the days, but everything just feels continually more intense, and it has been tough.
We're the same age, and I'm on similar journey of the reckoning of getting older, I themed my year the year of vitality. So I've had sinus surgery and a bunch of other medical things and changed a lot of my well-being and doing a lot of different wellness things as well. So I can certainly empathize there. And when, I remember reading a piece that you wrote in the Washington Post, and you invited at the time President Joe Biden to one of your facilities, and then a bunch of your employees showed up and they were in Make America Great, the red baseball caps. And I'm just curious, as a leader, I thought, what a dance to be in, because you're talking to people on both sides of the aisle. You're going with coalitions of CEOs to DC to talk to people in the Republican administration, and you've worked with Democrats, et cetera. You have your own political beliefs. So many CEOs shy away from that, but you brought that forward because there is a national conversation and a desire to do some of this. But what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, on having President Biden here, actually, we had hosted him during the 2020 campaign. So it was the tail end of the 2020 campaign. And then, of course, he ended up winning and he won Wisconsin. The majority of our employees, vast majority, probably 90%, 95%, supported Trump in that election and in 2024 as well. And actually, we had Tim Walz visit us during the campaign in 2024. So yes, everyone kind of knows where my politics stand. So each one of our plants, we have 7 plants, we have employee-only Facebook pages. And you're familiar with the Midwest. Uh-huh. I know Facebook maybe has fallen out of favor in some demographics, but if you're between 30 and 50 in the Midwest, you're on Facebook, for like multiple hours a day. And we have very candid conversations on there. Anyone says whatever they want. Someone called me ignorant once. I'll never forget. He was like, Sachin, don't play ignorant. And it was about a ventilation issue in his area of the plant, and we got it fixed. But we have these pages, and on this, they know where my politics stand. The day after election, when Trump won in 2024, I sent a note out to everybody saying, that I didn't, voted differently, voted for Harris, but I'm excited, about what this presidency can bring. And I'm excited because of, tax reform. And I said, I'm excited about tariffs, actually. At the time I was. And I said, this is going to be great for WAF. We're the type of company that this president wants to help. And so I sent out that note, and actually our chairman, who lives in DC, is a retired litigator, and he chimed in as well, saying, yep, I didn't support Trump either, but I'm excited for our company. And it was a great moment. We were all excited. And Q1 was excellent. Demand, the whole economy was like, yeah, this is good. And then the tariffs hit. And then I've been candid the other way. I've been like, look, we supported this. Now look, it's not good. And the approach is just straight up candor. I'm in so many conversations every day where often with business people, and we're all like tiptoeing around this idea that we have a political preference, and we either support this or don't. And, I'm really just tired of those boring, conversations where, how do you feel about today's economy? Well, it's okay. There's good stuff and there's bad stuff, and you can't ever land one way or the other. And we at our company just believe in the philosophy of, if you're going to say something, otherwise don't. And so that's the approach to politics. And I love it. I find it's very refreshing. I forward the articles I write. My first effort at this actually was 6.5 years ago when I joined the company. There's a local assemblyman who I can't stand. He's a Republican, and he was running for re-election. And I wrote a seething opinion piece in our local newspaper about it. And I posted it in our Facebook page, and it generated, a lot of comments. And it's been that approach ever since.
I don't know many CEOs that would even say on the record who they voted for in the last United States presidential election. I also don't know many organizations that leverage Facebook. And so many organizations say, no, we have to have that on Slack or Teams, and we have to control it, and all these things. So it's interesting that even in communicating with your employees, you're willing to use this external thing that you don't have full control over as a way to foster connection across these sites that you can't be at every day or all the time.
I think it goes to actually an element of the philosophy behind, what you do, at Pilot, which is, around democratizing engagement. And for me, being on Facebook through our employee pages is a way to meet people where they are. I think a more common practice might be, well, let me set up a Slack or let me send out memos. And I think Facebook is one of many different ways that we meet people where they are and make engagement easy for them.
You've got this job, and you're the first CEO that's not from the family of a nearly 120-year-old business.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You're also an independent director on the boards of Broadwind and Graphtech, Lodge Manufacturing, Volrath, and New North. And you're involved in you're the chair of the Wisconsin Council on Workforce Development, trustee at not one, but 2 universities. You're on other community boards, and you're even a Green Bay Packers director. And I know that's part of the shared ownership of that team, which is unique in the entire NFL. You do a lot. You'd think that if you didn't have a day job, that would be a lot. So I'm curious, why are you involved in all these things? Because it'd be enough to just do your day job. And at 44 years old, these are things that often people do kind of later in the twilight of their career or as they're sort of transitioning out. Why do all this?
I mean, the simple answer is it's fun. I really enjoy engaging in business, especially at kind of a strategy level. And my day job there's a lot of strategy, but 95% of the day, as it should be, is around minutia. Quality defects in parts, and someone employee didn't show up, and hiring and firing, and these kind of things, shipments and on-time delivery. And that part of my job is exhausting. And to me, serving on a board is actually a stress relief, in that you get to go there and you get to engage in what is necessarily high-level issues. I mean, I don't say this in I wash my hands of it type of manner, but it's not your job to execute thing, which is the part of my job that is quite stressful. It's okay, you got to go out and we want to get into this market. Okay, sounds great on paper. Now you actually have to do all this stuff. That is hard and exhausting. And I love participating on boards because it's a chance to have my mind 100% engaged on strategy. And why else to do it? Well, I'm firmly committed to being in our community. It's we live close to Green Bay, which is a city of 100,000 people. The broader 1 hour radius of the area is probably 500,000, maybe
Wow.
700,000 people. So not very big. I imagine 10 city blocks of Brooklyn have more economic activity and more people than our entire accessible drivable radius.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
It's not even a metro. I don't even know what you
catchment
call this.
area, maybe.
Catchment.
Yes.
And so I am always looking to keep my life, interesting and engaging, and all of these activities summed together keep me engaged in those ways. And so it's equal parts being fun, but also almost a necessity to relieve stress, but also just keep my mind alive.
And how do you manage the optics of both maybe your owners or your board for your day job, the people that you are responsible to, your employees and your management team, and then also your customers? Because they could, sort of reductively view it as you being distracted, even if you're out lobbying to try to get childcare, or you're getting funds to help with economic development and innovating new services and becoming more competitive and getting technical assistance, et cetera. We both know that. We know it stimulates you, it satisfies you, et cetera. But how do you manage the optics?
Yeah. That is something that is always on my mind, about, I don't even want people to have that perception, of me. It's not like I'm always telling people about the
Sure.
other things that I'm working on, but the more powerful way is I make it my aim to never let anyone down, in what I'm doing, especially in my core job. Like our employees, no matter where the level, should know that they can always reach me, and they do, whether it's through text and things like that, or, personally walking into the office where I am right now, or seeing me on the shop floor. And I really go to great pains to know what is happening on a very detailed level across our operations. And so, for instance, each morning at 8:05, I talk with our leadership team, and that conversation, I go one by one. We have 11 people on the team, and I go one by one, and we engage in detail, and I'll buttress the conversation with details that I have observed or picked up on through other channels, talking to somebody, seeing something. And so, there's this a little bit of a tension every day, which is he knows about that thing, and it's because he's engaged. So I never once want them to think that this guy is just not paying attention to
inattentive
it.
or focused elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if we were to look at the infrastructure that you deploy? Because you mentioned with your boys and making sure that they get their needs met, that you and your wife have dynamic careers, but you also are very committed to being great parents.
Yeah.
If we looked under the hood a little bit, what's your infrastructure or support to keep track of? Because I imagine those 8:05 meetings might conflict with a committee call for a board, or you might have a thing where there should be a customer pitch, but it's at the same time that you have a board retreat or a lobbying trip to DC or a media appearance or something else. So what's the air traffic control? What's the kind of organization, in addition to those, stand-up meetings, how do you stay, in the details to hold people accountable and to know that you're engaged?
Yeah, three things I would say. One is, like probably all of us, really deploying technology, personal communication technology to keep track of everything. Obviously calendar, we all use this, and my wife and I use calendar with an intensity that probably rivals any user, but also getting everyone around me to use technology. I mean, there are so many manufacturing companies like ours that are really in, backwaters of technology. My adoption of technology will only be so successful as I can get my ecosystem to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we really push technology, push their own communication, and then get everybody to be using those things so that we can use it effectively and I can use it effectively. Second is more old school in that, I have good, unique relationships with a lot of people, and I can have 3-minute conversations with them and quickly get to like the meat of an issue. One of my other pet peeves, I have a lot of pet peeves, but one of my pet peeves is, talking about the weather. Like, I cannot talk about the weather. It's just I'm maniacal about like every word in a conversation should somehow be educating either you or me. When someone comes into a meeting and just blathers about something that we all know, it just drives me up the wall because it's like you're wasting that precious time. But if you have good relationships, you don't need to like break the ice.
Sure. There's that background of relatedness that you have, so they know your intention and things like that. You can get right into it.
Yeah, you get right into it. We talk 3 minutes, boom, and then that update, and probably I'll bring it up tomorrow on an 8:05 call. So that would be the second method, I think, is that relying old school on relationships. And the third is really old school, and this is more kind of in the family context, is conversation. Every morning, my wife wakes up the kids, and then she goes to the gym in the morning. I think her class starts at 5:45.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And then my role is I make breakfast for the boys and we just talk, and just there's no TV, there's nothing. And then similarly, every Friday we go out to dinner, just the four of us, and have really intense conversation, funny, joking, but it's very cathartic. And we will be at the table, for hours. Like, last week, Friday, we went to a very fancy restaurant called Ever in Chicago. It was our 13-year-old's birthday present. He's a maddeningly fastidious foodie, who has very expensive tastes, which we're happy to humor. But so we went to it's a very fancy place, and we were there for 2.5, 3 hours, and I could kind of tell they kind of wanted to keep the table moving. But we just really enjoyed that time. So, that kind of old school conversation that is, therapeutic. It's, it helps us engage. It helps us learn about each other. That is fundamental, maybe even more important than those first two things.
Sachin, I was curious, if someone's thinking about kind of making the case, sometimes you have to have approvals from a compliance or conflict of interest perspective to get on a board. What has been accretive or benefited the Foundry by you doing things outside of the Foundry?
There's been tactical things, there are strategic things, and I think there are also understanding of the economy aspects. On the tactical side, here's an example. I'm on the board of a company called Lodge Cast Iron, which makes the best cast iron skillets, in the world, made right here in America in Tennessee, and a wonderful family-owned company. And to help fund an expansion, they used a really not widely known program through the U.S. Treasury called a New Market Tax Credit. It's used to help fund development in low-income or rural census tracts. And they use this, and it's 25% of your capital investment that can be offset through this program. So very powerful. And so Lodge used it. They have a great CFO who found that out. And then I brought that back to our company. I was like, hey, we looked into this thing, and we were about to launch a big expansion ourselves. And so turned out we were in one of those census tracts, both rural and low income. And so we did. And, it was a $25 million investment for us. That's 25% of that was paid for by this new market tax credit. So our company saved, $7 million through
Wow.
this. And I think whatever time I'm spending at Lodge is more than paid for, by that
Yes.
one thing, $7 million. And so there are a lot of tactics like that, whether it's forecasting or talent management, all sorts of things that I learn about from boards that I immediately bring back. I mean, our leadership team sometimes groans about it. I'm like, hey, I was in this board meeting and this guy did this one thing or this woman did this thing, and why aren't we doing it? And so there's a lot of that. But there's also just, general strategic thinking, around investing and what's value accretive. That learning, when you're excising that one portion of business activity and focusing only on it, very powerful. And then markets. There are certain markets that are in manufacturing that are doing great and some that are in the doldrums. And we're constantly trying to figure out, what's going to be the next one? Where are we headed? And by seeing inside view of all these companies, I get that vantage point.
I think too few executives get out, whether it's a community event or a conference or these things. But to your point of the curiosity and the stimulation and connecting dots and learning things, and a $7 million savings is pretty tremendous to a business of your size and margins. And so I think that's incredible. The last two questions I have for you, Sachin, the first is, any advice for folks that want to get on a board? How do they lay the groundwork? Because that doesn't happen quickly, typically. And the second is, what's the best part of being a part of the Green Bay Packers?
On the first one, I'll probably give the answer that most people do, which is it's about relationships. Inviting someone onto a board is like, they got to really trust you, and they got to understand what sort of insight you might contribute, and if it's going to be helpful. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing most people get on boards by knowing people who are on a board, and then when there's a vacancy, they think of you. And that's how it's worked out for me. And I think the best way for people to develop relationships is actually to work together, often on a board, and it starts with community. The first board I was ever on was for our local technical college. And it was actually not even the technical college itself, it was their foundation. But then someone there is another CEO or something, and they see you working, and that's how you kind of build on that. I'd say invest time in relationships, especially ones where people see you and your mind at work. Being on the Packers board, it's the best collection of people you could imagine. Everybody's doing something unique, and it's not just business people, it's nonprofit leaders, and that is the best part. Being in a room with all of those people and the collegiality that comes with it, and maybe eventually doing something together in business. It's like the same thing I'd say, people ask me like, why did you go to law school? Or what did you get out of law school? Or, you don't practice law. And I'd say the same thing, like, my best friends in life came from that time. I feel like you look back on anything you do, and those things are worthwhile and personally fulfilling when you're on a platform where you can make new relationships and in a good shoulder to shoulder way. And everyone knows that nobody on the board is calling any plays or making any personnel trades, so you never have to answer for that. That's done by the professionals.
Well, I think I think about myself, and I've started on a community board as well, and then it turned into being an advisor of a commercial organization, and then it turned into going to that person's wedding, and then doing other things. And again, those relationships, I think getting started is the key thing there.
Yeah.
So, Sachin, as we wrap up our conversation, we like to ask our guests, what's sticky and what are they thinking about? What is, something that might either be keeping you up at night because you're passionate or you're concerned or worried or you're committed? What's that for you?
The issue of childcare. Our company and I've done a lot of advocacy around investing in childcare and things that kids need. And the point I always try to make, and people always bring me into these conversations saying, okay, tell us about the workforce impact of not having childcare. And so my line that I'm supposed to talk about is, well, we won't have the labor force if we don't have childcare and women in the workplace, and et cetera. But really, actually, what makes me passionate about this and to the point where it gets me emotional every time I discuss it is it's about child's brain development, the brain development that happens between those ages of 0 and 5 and how important that is and how kids need to be in enriching environments. The thing that also set me on this path was a study that someone I grew up with in high school, went to college with. He's a famous economist. His name is Raj Chetty. And one of his earliest studies that put him on the map was he looked at the impact of a kindergarten teacher on a person's life trajectory and what it means in terms of income. And it was such an obvious thing that most of us know, that the people that you have in your life in those early years make an outsized impact, and truly your trajectory often revolves around or depends on who your kindergarten teacher was and how engaged they were. But it extends to everything, like how engaged is your family and what environment do you have. And I was talking with one of our employees, and this was another one of the moments that set me off on this path. And he's a single dad, and he's raising his kid on his own. And I asked him what he does for childcare, and he takes her to she was 4 years old at the time, takes her to a different home each day, and leaves her with a neighbor or anybody who's able to care. And I was just imagining her day, and it can't possibly be the enriching environment that she needs, even though she's probably loved by everybody. And it made me so sad, and kind of galvanized our company around, we got to do something. And we do support our employees with a monthly stipend to pay for childcare. And we've advocated for more structural solutions, but it all's around this idea of brain development. And came home again to me last week. My wife and I, after dinner, were just having another one of those extended conversations, very cathartic about, what influenced you as a kid, and there were experiences she related that were negative, and it really made me think about how that all impacts your entire life. And it recommitted me, we got to do everything we can, to invest in the experiences our children have, children in our community, our own personal children, in those very, very, very formative times. So when you ask about what is sticky, this is sticky. It is definitely front of mind in every conversation I'm having.
Well, Sachin, shout out to the educators in all of our lives. My mom spent her career in the community college system, and my sister was Teach for America alum and taught in New York City public schools for almost a decade. And so to anyone out there that may be a relative of, or if you're a teacher or educator yourself, thank you for your service and for shaping the future generations.
Absolutely.
Well, Sachin, thanks for making time for me and for our listeners, and generously sharing how you navigate being involved as a leader beyond the walls of your organization to benefit everyone, including yourself. So, Sachin, thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Ben. This is such an honor, really, an honor and a privilege to be on your podcast, and I appreciate all the work you're doing and getting these messages out to hardworking people out there.
Thanks for joining me this week on The Lift. For more info on what you heard in today's episode, visit our show notes. You can find out more about the show at theliftpod.com. If listening to The Lift today was a good use of your time, please share it with a colleague, a friend, I don't know, your ex, your mother, anyone. Don't let good advice die with you. And for those of you who like to earn a little bit of extra credit, leave a comment on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you. The Lift is produced and edited by the team at Edit Audio. This episode was produced and edited by Ali Sirwa, with additional production support from Victoria Marin. Our production manager is Kathleen Speckert. Our executive producer is Steph Colburn. A special thanks to Corey Rich and Beth Gatzik. There's only one way to go, upward. Well, Sachin, welcome to The Lift.
Thank you. That was quite a surprise.
One of our values as a company is vibrant, and we like to bring a vibrance to our interactions.
When I have my kids listen to this podcast, I'll have to edit out the swears from my pump up song.